Welcome.
Thank you have very much.
And the blue.
Scoot over here to this blue box.
Right there. You have 2 minutes for your opening remarks, and we invite you to share your vision for co-governing with people's organizations like People's Action, Iowa CCI Action, and Student Action.
Thank you very much for the question. Thank you to Iowa Action, to CCI Action, and to all of the organizations, People's Action, that have organized this here today. Buenas tardes. Good to see y'all. Good afternoon. Look, I grew up with my mother and my grandmother was an immigrant from Mexico that came here when she was 7 because she'd lost both of her parents, worked as a maid, a cook, and a babysitter because she never got out of elementary school. She raised my mom as a single parent. My mother was a hellraiser when she was young. She was an old Chicana activist, Mexican-American civil rights activist. And when I think about the work that y'all are doing, I think about the importance of movements. She was part of the old Chicano movement. She ran for city council when she was 23 years old on April 6, 1971, with a slate of people in San Antonio called the Committee for Barrio Betterment. All of them lost. But the night they lost, they asked my mom, about her defeat, and she said, "We'll be back." 30 years later, in 2001, I was elected at the age of 26 as the youngest city councilman in that city's history. But this is the important part. Progress never happens by accident. It happens because of movements, because of advocacy, because of people pushing the agenda in every way that you can. Marching, picketing, people running for office, folks making the time to volunteer and do the hard work of making sure that we move in the right direction. That's what y'all are doing. And you know what? That's going to be more important than ever for the next president. Because if we want to get universal health care, if we want to raise the minimum wage, if we want to fight climate change, it's going to take more than one politician or even one Congress. It's going to take you, a movement.
Thank you, Secretary Castro. For our first question, Sonny Garcia and Alex Andrade will ask a question on climate change and the Green New Deal.
Hello. Hey. My name is Sonny Garcia, and I'm from Bloomington, Illinois. I'm also a member of One People's Campaign. I live 45 minutes from Peoria, Illinois. Peoria, Illinois was recently rated the worst city in the USA for African Americans to live. This is due primarily to a coal-fired power plant that has polluted the air in that immediate area for decades. This pollution has caused disproportionately high rates of asthma for the African American community that lives in the neighborhoods surrounding that plant. The Edwards coal-fired plant in Peoria, Illinois had 6,000 clean air violations, essentially poisoning communities of colors for generations. Recently, the plant announced a plan to close in 2020. Although this is a victory for the movement, the community is still left holding the bag for the economic transition, for the loss of jobs, and for the coal ash cleanup. The industry is not only left a wake of multi-generational destruction, but is washing their hands of any responsibility to the thousands who lost family and friends due to their poisoning of the air and their corporate greed. That same corporate greed that made them choose to break the law and poison the air in Peoria, Illinois, not once, not twice, but 6,000 times. And that ain't right. It's beyond time that we build an energy economy that is both 100% clean and 100% controlled by our communities.
My name is Alex Andrade, and I'm a proud son of a Brazilian immigrant and a proud Iowa CCI Action member. I have seen living in the Midwest where big energy companies have put profit over the lives of people and their communities time and time again, and that ain't right. Secretary Castro, as president, will you commit to a 100% locally and democratically controlled, clean energy economy that is owned by the working class and communities of color?
Thank you very much for the question. Yes, that's what I believe that we should work toward. That's what I believe in. I released a climate action plan a few weeks ago that calls for us to get to net zero in the United States by 2045 at the latest, and lead the world to get there by 2050 by investing in a Green New Deal. And when I was mayor of San Antonio, in San Antonio we owned public utility, which is what we're talking about, public utilities instead of investor-owned utilities. When I sat on the board of the public utility, CPS Energy, we shuttered one of our coal-fired plants and instead invested in a 400 megawatt solar facility so that we could move toward renewable energy. And in addition to that, we also incentivized the creation of hundreds of jobs that went with the manufacturing of those solar panels. I believe that climate change presents us not only a crisis that we have to address and address urgently. You know, I have a 4-year-old son, and by the time he's in high school, we're going to have to act in an urgent way. It's also a wonderful opportunity to unleash a revolutionary clean energy economy that can benefit millions of Americans. And about 3 or 4 weeks ago, I was in Newton, Iowa. In Newton, maybe there's some folks from Newton, Iowa here in the audience, they had a Maytag facility that manufactured washing machines, and then it closed. Today, they have a company, TPI, that manufactures wind turbines and employs hundreds of people with decent paying jobs in clean energy. I think we need to do both of those things. We also, if we're serious, we need to dedicate the resources to getting us there. And so I have set down a plan that follows Jay Inslee's plan with a clean energy standard, a clean transportation standard that are big, that go with big investments to get us to net zero. We can do these things, and we have to. And for me, one of the things that I found most inspiring is how many young people out there are leading this fight on climate change. All of the folks that marched in the climate strike yesterday, not only in places like Manhattan, but here in Iowa and throughout our country and the world. I was at Linn-Mar High School in Cedar Rapids yesterday, or right around Cedar Rapids, and it was amazing. As we had this conversation about what we need to do to confront the climate crisis, how active and involved our young people are. They see it, they get it. We need to follow their lead, and as president, I will. Gracias.
Thank you, Secretary. We have a follow-up question.
Yes. So, Secretary Castro, if you truly believe in people and planet over profit, this means fighting corporate power. So how will you fight corporate greed and protect our communities with your Green New Deal plan?
We need to do that in different ways. Number one, we need to get big money out of politics. We need to overturn Citizens United so that the people, instead of big power and money, speak. Secondly, we need a carbon fee, and one that is balanced, but one that goes after the biggest polluters. We need to expect more in our tax code from big corporations. There is no reason that Amazon should make $11 billion in profit and pay no federal taxes, and that there are 60 other American companies last year that made millions or billions and didn't pay anything in taxes. We need a tax code that works for people who have to work for a living. Those are the kinds of things that I would do, in addition to appointing an EPA director that actually believes in environmental protection instead of lobbyists. We're going to make sure that those agencies are in the hands of people that truly care about our planet, are going to do the right thing.
Thank you so much, Secretary. We now have Ken Bowen and Sherry Hawk, who will ask a question about Medicare for all.
Secretary, my name is Ken Bowen, and I'm a veteran and a board member of CCI Action. I suffered from hepatitis C for over 40 years, and in 2014, after 2 failed attempts to eradicate the virus, my company insurance plan rejected the opportunity for a 3rd attempt using a completely new drug protocol to cure my hep C. They said it was too expensive. My doctor personally intervened and said that if I didn't get the coverage, I wouldn't get the treatment, and without the treatment, I would die. Eventually, the insurance company agreed to coverage. I was treated and cured. Thank you. Now free of hepatitis C, I still had stage 4 psoriasis. I'm sorry. Yeah, psoriasis. Cirrhosis, excuse me. One of those things. It was killing me. And I also had liver cancer. In 2015, I got a liver transplant. And by that time, I was on Medicare, and Medicare covered the entire cost of the procedures. Now, I must take 2 different immunosuppressants for the rest of my life. Using my wife's Medicare Part D plan as an example, it would cost me nearly $1,500 annually for those 2 drugs, and that does not include the plan's monthly premiums, the co-pays, and the deductibles. Now, as a veteran, I'm entitled to VA benefits, and going through the VA, I can get those exact same 2 drugs for less than $200 a year. There are no premiums, there are no co-pays, and there are no deductibles. This is my story. It's one of many, most of which are far, far worse. I'm one of the lucky ones. Thank you.
And I'm Sherry Hawk. I'm a nurse and member of CCI Action, of course. And Ken's story is typical because healthcare insurance companies are out there to make a profit rather than provide care. And so what we need is a moral defibrillator in the way of Medicare for all. So, Secretary, why should we continue to subsidize insurance company profits while many of us are left with the choice of unaffordable care and denial of care, sometimes with fatal consequences?
Thank you both very much for that. And like I bet like a lot of folks here in this room, I grew up with a family that knew what it was like to struggle. I grew up on the west side of San Antonio in a single-parent household where my mom was raising my brother and me, and also my grandmother who lived with us. And we knew what it was like to worry about whether you're going to have the money to pay for the rent at the first of the month or pay the light bill, and also the challenge of health issues. My grandmother had type 2 diabetes, and as long as I knew her, from before the time my brother and I were born, she struggled with that, and her condition got worse and worse. In fact, right before she passed away, she had to have one of her feet amputated, which is, people probably know, is very common or not uncommon for people with severe diabetes. But that entire time, she had Medicare. And so we could rest assured that she had good coverage. I want to strengthen Medicare for the people who are on it, and then make sure that everybody has Medicare who wants it. And I would also do things like ensure that our reimbursement rates are sufficient for rural hospitals, because in too many rural communities, hospitals are closing down, either completely or they're closing down their inpatient psychiatric units or OBGYN units. I would also end this distinction between physical health care and mental health care and invest in mental health care services. I also want to be very straightforward with folks. I believe that we should set very strong standards and base our system off of Medicare with what I consider a private option. If somebody wants to have a private health insurance plan, I think that they should be allowed to have one, as long as it is a strong plan that meets certain regulations. But we should base our system off of Medicare. And I believe that the vast majority of Americans are going to choose Medicare because it does offer stronger coverage than almost any health plan out there. We also need to understand that we have to improve Medicare, though, for the folks who are on there. And I think we're going to have a conversation as well about the ways that we can do that. For instance, one of the things that we worked on when I was Secretary of Housing was the link between housing and healthcare, and how we can make sure that we connect the dots there so that people in their golden years are able to get the wraparound service, the healthcare services they need closer to where they live to live a better quality of life. So those are some of the things that I would like to see us do as we move to a Medicare-based system.
Thank you, Secretary. We have a follow-up question.
Yes, with skyrocketing drug costs, many people are forced to choose between eating and taking their necessary medications. So how will you rein in the powerful pharmaceutical industry to end this misery?
Yeah, that is a wonderful question. And in my neck of the woods of Texas, we see a lot of people that have to go to Mexico to get their drugs, or they have to go get a dental procedure, a medical procedure. Folks up in New Hampshire, when I'm in New Hampshire, they talk about going to Canada to get their medication. There are several things I would do to answer your question. Number one, I would make sure that when we're investing federal taxpayer dollars in creating these pharmaceuticals, that the people have an interest and are able to keep the prices low. There's no reason that insulin should cost 10 times more in the United States than it does in Canada. I also would allow for the importation of drugs and allow the federal government to negotiate drug prices directly. And we need patent reform so that these companies can't just get an extension on their patents and continue to own them as proprietary and charge whatever they want. Y'all have probably seen, my time is about to be up, but y'all have probably seen that oftentimes these drug companies jack up the prices because they can. When I'm president, they can't.
Thank you, Secretary. We want to bring up Lillian Cheeseman and Reggie Griffin, who have a question about universal family care.
Hi, my name is Lillian Cheeseman. I'm a member of Citizen Action and the Democratic Party of Wisconsin. 2 years ago, my mom moved in with me and my fiance because she has Alzheimer's. She went from being able to walk a few blocks to the grocery store to not remembering we have one nearby in that time period. She doesn't need a nurse though, so we hired care workers to come in and help while we were at work, but it was really expensive. Caregiving is really difficult. It's harder than raising children. These are adults with adult bodies, with adult needs and wants, and everything is a negotiation, including you have to finish your dinner or put on pajamas. Doug and I are now struggling to pay the bills, and we have to balance her care with how much we can work. I need what millions need. I need respite care a few hours every day. I need some help to coordinate and connect with resources. I need for those resources to actually exist because I've been handed phone numbers that go to dead lines. You may become President of the United States, and I know standing here that there is nothing you can do to help me because it will be too late. Sorry. But there is someone in this room who doesn't know it yet, but in 3 to 5 years, they're going to be standing where I am, and we need to do better for them.
Secretary Castro, my name is Reginald Griffin, and I'm the board chair of Seniors in Action in Chicago. I'm also a caregiver for my best friend of many years. I know firsthand that care workers are not paid enough. Given that 43.5 million people across this nation are family caregivers for children, parents, or even best friends as myself, will you commit to ensuring that we will be able to access affordable, high-quality, universal family care, including supporting the workers who need to be part of this solution?
Thank you very much, Reginald. And Lily, thank you very much for sharing your story, for having the courage to come up here and share your story. As you say, your story, unfortunately, is the story of a lot of other families out there. And thank you for talking about it. Yes, I will. I believe that at every stage in life, we need to make sure that people are well taken care of. That is the commitment that our nation should make. And so I have called for universal child care in my Working Families First plan, for universal pre-K, for universal higher education. I also believe in universal family care, long-term care. I have proposed a plan already that would expand paid family medical leave, would expand the ability for caregivers to spend time away from their employment to take care of family members. But I also want to make sure that as this baby boomer generation turns 65, as they've been doing for a few years now, and they have housing needs, they have healthcare needs, and as future generations have those needs, that we have a plan to make sure that they're well taken care of. And that includes a place to live, it includes good health care, it includes making sure that they have the quality of life that this nation can be proud of. And so that is something that I would work toward as president.
Thank you, Secretary. We have a follow-up question.
We've all heard, including yourself, Secretary Castro, from Lillian, that the time for action is now. How will you take action in the first 100 days of your presidency to address our care needs?
In those first 100 days, I will work with Congress to put forward legislation that would fund a robust transition to a healthcare system based off of Medicare that will include funding for long-term care, so that we ensure that seniors in our country have a safe, decent, affordable place to live and the services that they need for a good quality of life. That's what I'd like us to aim toward. In addition to that, we're going to scour everything that this administration has done in terms of regulations at Health and Human Services, at the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and other departments to turn them back to where we were under President Obama, and then take them to the next level to provide greater care and work on those connections between housing and health care that we need to invest in.
Thank you, Secretary. Now I want to invite up Jacqueline Torres Toro and Mireya Sigala, who have a question about immigration.
Buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Eiby Jacqueline Torres y soy de Honduras.
Good afternoon. My name is Eiby Jacqueline Torres, and I'm from Honduras.
Desgraciadamente, la corrupción y la violencia y la impunidad en Honduras, en mi país, cambió mi vida para siempre.
Unfortunately, the corruption and the impotency that I felt in my home country made me have to leave.
Cuando mi esposo fue amenazado a muerte.
This happened when my husband was threatened to be murdered
por pandilleros.
By gang members.
Cuando él se negó a pagar dicha extorsión de 20,000 lempiras, a él lo asesinaron.
These gang members were trying to extortion him. They asked him to pay 20,000 pesos, and when he refused to do so, they murdered him.
Y a los 4 días de haberlo asesinado, me encontraron a mí y también me amenazaron de muerte.
4 days after he was killed, they found me and they started threatening me of murder.
Con dolor en mi alma tuve que dejar a mis hijos y a todo lo que tenía allá. Por amor a que no me mataran a mí y por salvarle la vida a mis hijos.
With all the pain in my soul, I knew that I had to leave. I had to leave to save the life of my kids and save my own life.
Como siempre, nosotros las madres damos la vida por nuestros hijos. Es por eso que tuve que unirme a una caravana teniendo que venir caminando desde Honduras hasta Tijuana.
Like any mother, I know that we would give our life for our kids. I had to leave and walk from Honduras all the way to Texas.
Y sufriendo porque mi hijo tiene una enfermedad de epilepsia y tenía que venir sufriendo por todo el camino.
My son suffers from epilepsy, and throughout the caravan, I suffered with him.
Tuve que ser fuerte y enfrentarme al miedo. Enfrentarme al miedo porque hubieron muchos compañeros que perdieron la vida en el camino también.
I had to be strong and face my fears because there was a lot of comrades that lost their life in this caravan.
Yo llegué a la frontera pidiendo ayuda para mi hijo porque venía sufriendo de su epilepsia y en vez de darme atención para mi hijo nos trataron como que si fuéramos unos delincuentes y unos perros.
When I arrived at the border, I was asking for help for my son because he suffers from epilepsy. Unfortunately, we were met with more discrimination and bad treatment.
Los agentes los metieron en un cuarto frío y los trataron muy mal.
The agents treated us really bad, and they put us in these very small, cold rooms.
Pues yo no me vine de mi país porque quise, sino porque me obligaron a salir de mi país los delincuentes de allá.
I didn't leave my home country because I wanted to. I left because the gang members there forced me out of my country.
Ahora vivo con el miedo de ser deportada a mi muerte en Honduras.
Now I live with the fear of being deported back to Honduras to my death.
Buenas tardes, mi gente. I'm Mireya Sigala, an activist for marginalized communities in Wisconsin and a very proud daughter of once undocumented immigrants. Volunteering to help the caravan in Tijuana, having a partner who is fighting his own asylum case, and working to release many in the for-profit prisons, I know firsthand the dehumanization our current immigration process perpetuates. Was it not on? Oh, do you want me to say it again? I'll say it again. Buenas tardes. I am Mireya Sigala, activist for marginalized communities in Wisconsin and a very proud daughter of once undocumented immigrants. Volunteering to help the caravan in Tijuana, having a partner who is fighting his own asylum case, and working to release many in the for-profit prisons, I know firsthand the dehumanization our current immigration process perpetuates. Secretary Castro, how will you address the crisis at the border, the treatment of children and families in the camps, and the root causes of the migration crisis?
Thank you very much for the question. Y señora Torres, gracias por venir, gracias por hablar a nosotros sobre su experiencia. Lo siento para lo que ha pasado a usted y su familia. Con su permiso voy a hablar en inglés. I was just saying that I'm sorry to Ms. Torres about what happened to her and to her family, and thanking her for talking to us about her experience. Look, I don't think there's anything that has been more depressing than the way that this administration has treated families at the border. Because it does not reflect who we should be, not only as Americans, but as human beings. Your question is about what I would do to make sure that we're protecting our children and our families. I was the first candidate to put out an immigration plan in early April. And I did that because I believe that when you're facing a bully like Donald Trump, who is treating people with cruelty, that the answer is not to backpedal and pretend like we don't have our own vision. It's to lay down a vision that represents something completely different from this president, that says we can treat people with compassion and common sense and manage our immigration system instead of treating people with cruelty. So under my administration, we're going to stop separating families. No more children in cages or sleeping on floors. No more playing games with people who are trying to get asylum at the border. No more treating people like they're less than human. No more scapegoating of immigrants and acting like they are other from us. No more inciting fear and cruelty toward people who are human beings also and who also deserve a voice. What we are going to have is that we're going to honor asylum claims from families who often have been subjected to violence like Ms. Torres's. We're going to make sure that if you've experienced gang violence or domestic violence, that is a reason again that you can claim asylum. We're going to end the Remain in Mexico program because they're sending people to Mexico to dangerous circumstances on the other side of the border, people who are often getting kidnapped and ripped off because they're sent there by the U.S. government when they come to claim asylum. We're going to make our immigration courts separate from the Department of Justice so that they're independent and neutral. We're going to put our undocumented immigrants on a pathway to citizenship, our dreamers and their parents, but also all others, because we're not going to separate between good immigrants and bad immigrants. Anybody who hasn't committed a serious crime should have the opportunity to get on a path to citizenship. And we're going to fix our legal immigration system too, so you don't have to wait years and years to become a citizen.
Thank you so much, Secretary. We have a follow-up question.
As you've heard, deporting Jacqueline would be the death sentence for her as well as thousands of other immigrants in similar situations. We know that you do not control the other situation or have control over the situation, but we want to know if you will work with us and use your campaign to shine a light on the plight of Jacqueline, her family, refugees facing this crisis, and all immigrants in this nation.
I would be proud to do that. I very much will. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Secretary. Now I want to invite up Kim Stevens and Shannon Walker, who are going to ask a question about family farms and the environment.
Secretary Castro, I'm Kim Stevens. I'm an Air Force veteran and a mother to 3 young boys. We live in a small town about 45 minutes north of here, and last November, 3 applications were submitted for hog confinements that would place 15,000 hogs within 2 miles of our community. That ain't right. People were concerned, and hundreds showed up to our Board of Supervisors meeting in opposition to the applications. It took hours to get through testimony from the community that was concerned about air and water quality issues. Despite our resistance, the Board of Supervisors approved all 3 sites. Boo, yeah. Worse than that, one of the sites has manure application sites abutting our town. What many people don't realize is that hog waste is equivalent to human waste, except that hogs produce 9 to 10 times as much waste. Yeah, that's like adding 135,000 people to our community and putting all that waste on our agricultural fields. Yeah. All the stuff that makes human waste so disgusting is being laid on land next to our homes with ditches that run into our town, by our schools, and through our soccer fields. And all of the protections that are in place are not enforced. We are left at the mercy of the producers who get to decide if they're going to be good neighbors or not. Instead, our towns are disintegrating, our children are moving away, and we're losing rural America. My name is Shannon Walker, and I am from Clarion, Iowa. I
I joined the fight against factory farms when I learned Prestige Foods proposed to bring a slaughterhouse to my county. Just like Kim, my local elected officials bent over backwards for the destructive industry. Secretary Castro, in our questionnaire, you stated you would be in favor of a moratorium on new and expanding factory farms. Thank you for taking a stand, but can you give me any specifics on how you would plan to take on such a powerful and intimidating industry?
Yeah. Thank you very much for the question to Kim and to Shannon. I absolutely do support that moratorium because I know of the environmental hazard that is being created by many of these operations. And I want to make sure that we have better environmental standards in place before any kind of expansion happens or new factory farms are put out there. I also believe that, we have to consult neighbors in the process and engage them better in this policy making around where these factory farms are sited before permits are given. That's the type of process that I would like to see in place that is more responsive to the needs and the concerns of neighbors. I come from local government. I was a city councilman in San Antonio, and then I was mayor of San Antonio, and I know that too oftentimes the concerns of neighbors are overlooked in these things. And as y'all know, it's often the poorest communities that get hit the hardest. And with basic things like clean water, and sometimes in other places, clean air that are affected. The federal government has a role to play. I'll do several things. Number one, I'll appoint people to the Environmental Protection Agency that are going to enforce our laws, and then we're going to strengthen those laws. We also want to work with our private sector to incentivize the right behavior, right? To incentivize in agriculture generally, and in this type of farming, people to do a better job by water quality and by air quality, and also animals. I was the first, I think there may be one other candidate, I was the first candidate to put out a plan to protect animals and wildlife, including how certain animals are treated in the agricultural industry. Now, obviously, we need our agricultural industry. Our agricultural industry needs to thrive, right? But I believe that when it comes to the quality of our water, when it comes to the nuisance that's created in neighborhoods, in communities, and when it comes to the treatment of animals, that we can do better. And I would both use a carrot and a stick. The carrot of incentivizing the right behavior by regulation and by law, and then also the stick of better enforcement when people step over that line.
Thank you. We have a follow-up question.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Aside from the moratorium, what environmental protections are you going to put in place to protect our communities from continued environmental degradation?
In addition to the moratorium, I would like to see us improve our clean water standards. I would like to see us improve our clean air standards. I would also like to see us be able to work with communities who have been impacted by these factory farms so that we invest in those areas and we're able to remediate the damage that has already been done, right? There's a whole remediation effort that needs to happen. And so as we consider grants at the EPA and other departments, I would look to see what we can do when it comes to remediation.
Thank you so much. We have Lament Barnett and Tiana Caldwell who have a final question for you to include in your closing remarks on housing.
Hello, my name is Lamont Burnett, and I'm a leader with One People's Campaign in Illinois and the Campaign for National Homes Guarantee. In 2000, I had a stroke that left me unable to work. I lost my job and I became homeless. I stayed in shelters for 2 years until my SSDI came through. This allowed me to move into a single-room occupancy hotel where the rent was $280 a month. The living conditions were deplorable. The ceilings was made out of chicken wire and falling apart. We had shared toilets of 150 men, which never worked. The heat and water were often cut off in the middle of the Chicago winter. My neighbors got sick and died due to these conditions, but I stayed. It was housing I could afford, and having a roof over my head was better than living in shelters. 2 years ago, an investor came through and bought the building and displaced 150 men who lived there to flipping into a luxury development. Rents will go from $340 to $1,200 per month, which is not affordable for working class people. In those years, I really could have used public housing unit, but instead, HUD was passing policies to disinvest from public housing in Chicago. We've seen thousands of units, public housing torn down and not replaced. The Department of Housing and Urban Development has failed people like me.
I'm Tiana Caldwell. I am a leader with KC Tenants in Action. Last year, my landlord evicted me. I ended up in a place owned by an out-of-state landlord. Sewage came up through the pipes on the first night that we slept there. The landlord never did anything. We had to leave, and we were homeless for 6 months. Why are we forced to live like this in the wealthiest country in history? I can't take it anymore. I need a homes guarantee. Secretary Castro, in your closing remarks, will you tell us how your approach will be different than when you were HUD Secretary, and whether or not you can commit to a homes guarantee that includes 12 million social housing units, massive reinvestment in public housing, a national tenants bill of rights, including universal rent control, and a commitment to end homelessness and the commodification of housing once and for all?
Thank you all very much for the question. Thank you for sharing your experience. I served as Secretary of Housing and Urban Development for President Obama from the middle of 2014 until the end of 2017. I'm proud of a lot of progress that we did make. During the administration, we reduced homelessness overall by about 10%. We reduced veteran homelessness by 47% between 2010 and 2016. We fought in Congress for more money to address homelessness and to create more units. But look, there's still a tremendous amount of need out there. That just started to scratch the surface of what we need to do. And so I have a housing plan that I've put out that reflects my plan to make sure that everybody has a safe, decent, affordable place to live, because I believe that housing is a human right and that we should treat it like that. So my plan would make an investment to end homelessness in our country by 2028. Youth homelessness, chronic homelessness, family homelessness. It would invest dollars to create 3 million more housing units over the next 10 years. It would create also a refundable renter's tax credit, because the rent is spiking in so many communities, big and small, in our country. It would invest in the low-income housing tax credit to expand housing units out there, and also in community development block grants and in home funding, so that we can both create more housing units for people that need them and make sure that people can afford the rent. The final thing that it would do is create an entitlement program out of our voucher program, so that if you make less than 50% of the area median income, you will be entitled to a housing choice voucher, so that you can get housing that is affordable to you and your family when you go into the private market. Those are the kinds of things that I would like to do. Let me just tackle this squarely. There are some differences between what I understand the home guarantee is and what my plan is, right? I don't want to sugarcoat that, that's true. But I believe that mine is the most ambitious plan that any candidate has put forward, and that would help ensure that everybody has a safe, decent, affordable place to live.
Thank you so much, Secretary. Gracias por acompañarnos. Thank you so much.
Gracias. Thank you very much.
Castro, thank you.
Thank you.